Baker Mayfield is the biggest bet winner coming out of the NFL draft. We'll explain why next.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madgziuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madgziuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madgziuk. And on today's show, we're going to look at a handful of veterans that are actually big winners coming out of the NFL draft when it comes to their dynasty value. And Kate, the first one couldn't be any more obvious. It's Baker Mayfield. Why is he a winner?
I mean, it's hard to describe why he's not a winner. You look at the circumstances that have led up to the season. They've got Mike Evans. They're bringing back Chris Godwin, who, yes, is coming off a pretty serious ankle injury here. But you also had, the emergence of Jalen McMillan. Now you add in Ohio State wide receiver Emeka Egbuka, who was selected 19th overall in this draft, second wide receiver off the board. And I thought, maybe from a fantasy standpoint, Emeka Egbuka was not the highest upside prospect. But I did think that Emeka Egbuka offered whatever NFL team he was taken to a very, very safe floor because I'm going to be honest, I think he does just about everything very well. And he's going to add a very high floor for whoever's passing him the ball, which guess what? That's Baker Mayfield, baby.
Yeah, I mean, Tampa Bay had some injuries at receiver last year with Mike Evans getting hurt early on, and then Chris Godwin obviously missing the rest of the year after that ankle injury. And Baker still was really good once he started to get some of these weapons back. This just increases the floor for Baker, right? That he's always going to have viable weapons because even after his top two receivers, Jalen McMillan and Emeka Egbuka, that's probably the best number 3, number 4 duo in the league. Then you have Cade Otton, a pretty decent pass catching tight end, Bucky Irving, who is a very good receiver out of the backfield. He's just loaded with weapons. The other part of this is they didn't spend their first round pick on a defensive player. So that's probably going to mean a lot more shootouts in Tampa Bay. I know they drafted defense basically the rest of the draft, but they didn't get a premier defender that can come in and help right away. I think everything is lining up for Baker to have another monster season in 2025 and beyond. And that's the thing, Kate, is they have invested into Chris Godwin, who's going to be there for the foreseeable future. Jalen McMillan is on the second year of his contract. And now you've got Emeka Egbuka tied up for the next 5 years. I don't see a situation where Baker's ever going to be short of weapons in Tampa Bay.
Absolutely not. Definitely not short of weapons by any stretch of the imagination. Let's even just go back to last year. He finishes the QB3 in fantasy. And Marcus, do you know how many top 5 finishes Baker Mayfield posted in the first 7 weeks of the season?
Oh, at least a few, right?
5 of 7
It's
weeks
ridiculous.
To start the season. Baker Mayfield was a top 5 quarterback. He was a top 3 weekly finisher in 4 of those 5 top 5 weeks. His upside was already pretty tremendous and, had kind of that midseason lull, came back with a vengeance for the fantasy playoffs, QB5, QB2 in your fantasy football championship. So we are finally seeing kind of the emergence of Baker Mayfield as a true viable option for fantasy. We're seeing him achieve his upside as a passer, ranked 7th among all quarterbacks last year with at least 250 dropbacks in PFF passing grade, average 8 yards per attempt. That was tied for the 4th highest average in the National Football League, ranked 3rd in passing yards, completed 71.8% of passes. There was really nothing that Baker Mayfield couldn't do last year. Even saw, I think, some of his upside as a runner over the past couple of seasons. We're seeing him exercise some of that mobility. gas him up, gas me up. I'm all in on Baker Mayfield is probably one of the most affordable QB2s in Dynasty that I think we should probably be considering closer to QB1 based on a QB1, not
AQB1,
QB1,
yeah.
based on the personnel and talent surrounding him.
Yeah, QB 13 in the latest batch of Dynasty ADP. I've got 3 other young quarterbacks, and I want you to tell me which one you think increased their Dynasty value the most over the weekend. Let's start with Caleb Williams, who the Bears drafted Colston Loveland at pick 10, and then turned right around and drafted Luther Burden at pick 39. We've got Jordan Love, who the Packers drafted Matthew Golden in round 1, their first round receiver since I believe 2003. And then we've got Bryce Young, who the Carolina Panthers selected Tetairoa McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona, at 8. Of those 3 quarterbacks, whose value increased the most?
It's really hard not to say Caleb Williams just because of the fact that, man, you were already kind of looking at that receiving room as one with plenty of upside. We know Rome Odunze has a much higher ceiling than we saw in year 1. We knew Caleb Williams has a much higher ceiling than we saw from him as a passer in year 1. But the Bears have kind of made it absolutely impossible for him not to have somebody open at all times. You look at Luther Burden, you look at Colston Loveland. Those are 2 guys that, man, you get the ball in Luther Burden's hands. He's that threat after the catch. Colston Loveland, an elite separator with elite size, moves like a wide receiver, built like a tight end. And yeah, I don't think there's anything that you can say when you're considering the fact that like DJ Moore still there in the offense. And then you have Rome Odunze. Like, that is probably, I think, the highest upside skill position group in the National Football League as a whole.
Yeah.
And I just think the depth paired with the upside, you've got to look at Caleb Williams as also a huge winner in this draft.
I tend to agree with you because you've added not 1 but 2 dynamic weapons in the passing game. I would say for Jordan Love, I think it helps obviously adding Matthew Golden, but I don't know that Golden's going to be like the featured number 1 in the offense. I just think he's going to be a really good, solid role player.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Love likes to be more of a point guard anyways and just to feed one receiver. So I think it helps, but I don't think it moves the needle a ton. I do think it moves the needle for Bryce Young because Bryce Young last year was throwing to a rookie Xavier Legette who struggled, a pretty washed up Adam Thielen, Jalen Coker for some of the year, Jonathan Mingo at some points. And now you get a bona fide number 1 receiver that can win on the outside, that can win from the slot. I just think that wide receiver room looks totally different than it did 12 months ago. And I just feel better about Bryce Young being a fantasy viable quarterback than I did coming into the draft.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about some young running backs that we thought gained some value over the weekend. There weren't a ton because there were so many running backs drafted and several into some pretty rough situations, but let's talk about Chase Brown next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props, from 3-pointers to steals to assists. FanDuel has so many great ways to bet on your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine your live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Nobody else is doing that right now. And I know sometimes it's hard to get to the opening tip-off, but you don't have to miss out. If you miss out on the tip-off, go over to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We're discussing some of the biggest vet winners coming out of the NFL draft. Okay, we had to start with Chase Brown, the running back for the Cincinnati Bengals. Going into draft weekend, he was being valued as RB13. We heard some rumblings that they might be interested, the Bengals, in drafting a running back. They brought Quinshon Judkins in for a visit. They brought Travion Henderson in for a visit. Caleb Johnson was a 30 visit. And they don't select a running back until late on day 3, Taj Brooks. I think it's all systems go for Chase Brown, at least this year.
All systems go for sure. And again, looking at what we got out of Chase Brown last year, 990 rushing yards, average 4.3 yards per carry, 7 touchdowns. And that was in a role that, like, we didn't really necessarily see him take over immediately to start the season. We saw Zach Moss kind of initially in that more voluminous role.
Are you still a Zach Moss truther?
So, I mean, it's hard because, I mean, dude's dealing with a neck injury. I don't even think the Bengals have a great idea of what to expect
It's a bummer
with his health. So he was on a 2-year deal. This is the final year for Zach Moss in this offense, if he is in fact able to come back. But I mean, you look at the opportunities that he had in this Bengals offense. I mean, 4 games last year with 20 plus rush attempts. That's nothing to sniff at, right? I don't necessarily think he got better with the higher workloads that he received. In 3 of those 4 games with 20 or more carries, failed to clear 4 yards per attempt. I think
that might be an offensive line stat, but yes.
Fair. But again, we kind of look at Chase Brown as kind of this explosive efficiency guy. That wasn't necessarily the case last year. We'll see if things improve, but he's got speed, he's got size, and the Bengals, I mean, I can't really picture anybody else in free agency or otherwise moving the needle here in terms of what kind of workload Chase Brown's going to get moving forward.
And I just told
this season.
No, and they're not going to spend the money at that position with so many needs on defense. So this is the backfield going forward, at least for this year. And what do we always say about the running back position? It's a year by year thing.
Mm-hmm.
Chase Brown going into year 3 with, I mean, you've got, I hate to be with Zach Moss, but I just have my doubts that he's ever going to get back in the field. I like Taj Brooks, but that is a couple touch a game player. I mean, at this point, Kate, I'm going to be shocked if Chase Brown's not averaging 16, 17 touches a game. And we think this is going to be one of the best offenses in the NFL. So I'm looking at him as RB13, and I'm looking at a couple of the names ahead of him. Like, would you take Christian McCaffrey right now over Chase Brown for the 2025 season? I wouldn't. I would much rather have Chase Brown. He's younger and likely going to be on a much better offense.
I mean, I guess it feels disgusting though.
Okay, how about this one? I'm going to be crazy. Bucky Irving or Chase Brown?
Give me Bucky Irving 10 times out of 10. Are you kidding me?
Breece Hall or Chase Brown? Breece Hall is the better player, just to be clear.
But well, that's the thing. So when you're asking me who's the better player for all of these, the answer is whoever you're naming that's not Chase Brown, I think. But
right, but I guess I look at, you've got the Jets, who they're going to be very run heavy, so that's going to help. But we've already heard Aaron Glenn say they're going to be in a running back by committee approach. I don't think Justin Fields offers a lot of upside to keep the offense moving up and down the field. I would rather have Chase Brown this year. I just would.
Should be more scoring opportunities.
Absolutely.
Yes. So I think that's fair.
Let's go through some other young running backs. The Buffalo Bills, they did not select a running back in the first 4, 5, 6 rounds, I believe. James Cook, I know he's holding out right now, but if his primary competition is just Ty Johnson and Ray Davis, it sure feels like he's going to be in for another big season.
I think that's absolutely the case. And again, one of those circumstances that, like, you look at kind of his overall ranking, I feel like he's not a guy that's getting just a ton of hype in general. We know he's seeking a new contract, which he hasn't received just yet, but all systems go in terms of offense being good. Check. Upside is, behind a rushing quarterback that can really open up running lanes for him. Check. the biggest question mark that we had for James Cook throughout his career is, can he be the touchdown guy? He answered that wholly in 2024. I just don't think there's a ton of competition. Obviously, we saw Ray Davis have, some solid moments in his rookie season, but this is James Cook's backfield, and there's not much debate about that.
I got one more for you that I wanted to mention. We thought that the Commanders could potentially draft a running back at the end of round 1, or certainly by the end of round 2. Austin Eckler looks pretty washed at this point. Brian Robinson going into the final year of his contract. The Commanders don't do that. Instead, this is going to be Brian Robinson's backfield. And if you look at the latest batch of ADP, Brian Robinson is RB29. And if he stays healthy for 15, 16 games, okay, there's no way that he doesn't finish much, much higher than that. So I think Brian Robinson, in an offense that we've projected to be really good this year, I think he's a massive winner.
Brian Robinson, big winner. I'm going to cap this off with one more that I think is an intriguing guy to talk about, especially coming off a fairly disappointing rookie season. What are we thinking about Trey Benson, who, obviously 3rd round pick, 2024 NFL draft, wasn't always fully healthy, played behind James Conner. James Conner got his extension. But again, James Conner aging. And we know that, he is coming off his healthiest season to date, but he's an aging running back. He's 29 years old. He's about to turn 30 here in just a couple of days. I think Trey Benson is still a guy worth monitoring here, because I don't really think we saw him get the ideal opportunity there as a rookie. And I think, like, from a long-term perspective, the Cardinals didn't select a single running back. Like,
I think they only took one offensive player in their entire draft.
Like, that was the theme of the draft. So I think, like, what you see is kind of what you get. And I think what you're going to get is some potential upside for Trey Benson long-term. He had that fairly early draft capital. I believe he was 2nd running back off the board last year. Like, why aren't we looking at Trey Benson as a possible winner when, even last year we were talking about James Conner as not that lock. That's even more so the case this year.
I think Trey Benson's like 3 years younger than RJ Harvey, who went in the 2nd round this year. Now Harvey went into a really good situation, but that's kind of the point. Like, Trey Benson is incredibly young, and he is one injury away behind a really injury prone running back from being the starting running back there in Arizona. And I think this Arizona offense is going to take a big step forward with Marvin Harrison in year 2. They've got Trey McBride. The offensive line has some concerns, especially after losing their offensive line coach, Clayton Adams. But I do think Benson is a really good buy low candidate right now. RB 36. You can get him at pick 112 in your startup drafts. I think Benson's a big value, and I think he is one of the big vet winners coming out of the draft.
I love me some Trey Benson. He was one of my favorite running back prospects last year. Again, didn't work out as a rookie, but I think when you flip on the tape, feels like the reps that he got were just generally underrated. And
I think he's going to be okay.
I think he's got the talent. I think, they are putting this offense in a position to not be terrible. Like,
could he be our 2024 version of Brian Robinson, where maybe it's not the sexiest thing in the world to start him, but this ends up being a guy that you rank as a low end RB2, but you just don't have to pay that kind of price at all.
Yes. And let's just talk about, like, the insurance policy aspect of this, right? Like, if I were to tell you that James Conner was going to play 10 games this year, how highly would you be ranking Trey Benson?
In top 30 running back?
Pretty easily, I think. So I think, like, in terms
ahead of Travis Etienne, ahead of guys like that, right?
Absolutely. So that, in my mind, signals a buy.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about a receiver who is a massive winner from a dynasty perspective over the weekend, but maybe not from a real life perspective. We will get to CeeDee Lamb next. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go between dining out, online shopping, coffee runs, whatever? You check your bank account and it's all gone, or it's easy to lose track of how much money you have or don't have in there. But that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, all of your investments, and your spending in one place, so you could stop managing your money and start building your wealth. When I started using Monarch, probably 3-4 months ago, I realized how much money our family was wasting by coffee runs, pizza runs that we didn't need. But now we are budgeting smarter and we are saving more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Show. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stops. Hosts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. All right, Kate, let's talk about CeeDee Lamb, who is currently wide receiver 3 over on Dynasty League Football. We had a lot of buzz and rumblings kind of coming into the draft that the Cowboys were going to take a receiver at pick 12. They wanted Tetairoa McMillan. He went 8 to the Panthers. There was some buzz that the Cowboys were going to take Luther Burden in the second round. Instead, the Bears scoop him up 5 picks before that as I was screaming in my house. So the Cowboys just didn't draft a receiver at all. And now you look at their depth chart, and it's Jonathan Mingo, Jalen Tolbert, Ryan Flournoy. These are real names. Jalen Brooks. Is CeeDee Lamb in line for like 200 targets this year?
Oh, God, yes. I mean, what's crazy is that this has been back-to-back seasons for the Cowboys where they miss out on their intended target the first time around, and then they just say screw it. And they just write the position off their board entirely. Fascinating move by this entire staff. I'm so sorry about the Cowboys front office, but yeah, they cray. But I mean, CeeDee Lamb, absolutely huge winner. There's no chance he doesn't emerge from this season with like 160 targets. I think it's pretty fair.
I keep thinking, like, I don't see any world in which he doesn't average double-digit targets a game. If he plays 17 games like he generally does, okay, we're looking at like 175, 180, maybe even more than that.
And maybe we also need to be also extending some of this talk to, I don't know, one of our kind of favorite sleeper tight ends in general, Jake Ferguson, because guess what? It wasn't just the wide receiver position they ignored. They didn't draft a single tight end. Drafted Jadon.
They didn't draft a running back till the
running back, 5th round. Like, the personnel is what the personnel is at this point. So, like, if we're going to be also crowning CeeDee Lamb with 10 plus targets a game, I think we have to acknowledge what Jake Ferguson might be able to do now, healthy, coming off, an injury kind of riddled season. But I do think fully healthy with Dak Prescott under center, this could be a monster season for Jake Ferguson, who we've already seen a pretty safe floor from, been a top 12 tight end, I think back-to-back seasons prior to this past year. I just think we have to extend that same excitement to Jake Ferguson because, hey, we know Dak Prescott loves him some Jake Ferguson. He loves the tight end position. They have a very, very good rapport between that quarterback and tight end. It's going to be Jake Ferguson. It's going to be CeeDee Lamb. And I think the rest is all just kind of.
So let me ask you this before I get into this next part of it. Does it concern you at all that the Cowboys don't have another viable option? Because when I look at, let's say, the top 10 or so dynasty receivers, Jamar Chase has T. Higgins. Justin Jefferson has Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson. Amon-Ra St. Brown has Sam Laporta and Jameson Williams and Jahmyr Gibbs. Brian Thomas now has Travis Hunter. Puka Nacua has Devontae Adams. Nico Collins has the Iowa State receivers and 17 other receivers on that roster. Does it concern you that the Cowboys don't have another receiver that can take some of the attention away from CeeDee Lamb?
It doesn't, because I think CeeDee Lamb is just that good, and I think the volume is just that plentiful. Is it ideal? Absolutely not. But it's not like you're sticking George Pickens out there and putting him on an island.
And it's not like he has a terrible quarterback either that can't get him the ball. That's the other part of this. Like, I look at someone like Malik Neighbors, who he's got some other guys like Darius Slayton, who we like, and Wan'Dale Robinson.
Role players.
Yeah, he's got some better role players than what CD has. But if it's Russell Wilson throwing him the ball, I just trust Dak a lot more to be able to feed the number one receiver.
Absolutely.
So are we talking about wide receiver 1 in dynasty leagues, or does that still belong to Chase and Jefferson?
I think you can make the case for any one of them, but I do think just based on,
I would go Jefferson and Chase, by the way. But I think
Yeah.
the gap between CD and Neighbors is wider than it was going into the draft. I really like Malik Neighbors, but CeeDee Lamb's ceiling and floor are just so much higher.
Oh yeah, and again, you kind of know exactly what you're going to get. We've seen him produce at this level for several seasons now. I think that's probably, like you said, where the bigger tier break has been made here. When we look at maybe the quarterback as sort of the tiebreaker in the tier breaker there. I think Dak Prescott obviously gives him a much greater edge. And yeah, would it be ideal if maybe he had some better role players around him? Like, we want him to get that, 160 plus target mark, right? But if, if he's going to be the only guy there, and he doesn't have to contend with some of these targets, even if he might be seeing some more defensive attention, I just think he's too good to care.
Yeah, I'm with you. Last one, really quickly before we go. Jaxson Smith-Njigba, wide receiver 13. There was some talk that maybe they would draft Matthew Golden in round 1. I know they like Tetairoa McMillan, but no real concerns there for JSN kind of coming out of the draft. So do we boost them up even more?
I think you have to. I mean, we have seen obviously like the trade for DK, or trade away of DK Metcalf. They did get, an offensive weapon in Elijah Arroyo, but again, one of these guys that, I don't know, maybe would have been drafted in the first round had he been able to stay healthy at any point in his career, but that has not been a point of reliability for Arroyo coming into this draft. So I think when you're projecting in terms of, the volume here with Sam Darnold, who again, not my favorite quarterback, but I'm hard pressed to find a guy that I think, is as good a value for the talent I evaluated him to be, paired with the potential for 150 plus targets in
He's also
any
23.
season.
It's like I think Cooper Kupp is basically dust at this point, and there's no real other options. So I think we're all systems go for 160 targets for JSN, which is exactly what we wanted to hear coming out of the NFL draft. That is it for today's show. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen of the day. Make sure you're downloading the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Madgziuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. On tomorrow's show, we'll look at some vet losers coming out of the NFL draft, and there are several. So make sure you tune in for that, and we'll see you right back here on Thursday.